Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's international workshop on the role of blockchain and the sustainable energy transition in the Arab region. My name is Omar Kaki, and I work on the energy team at Esqua, and I'll be your guide for today's workshop. This workshop forms part of Esqua's work on blockchain technology, which included an expert group meeting last September, today's workshop, and a technical report to be launched this summer, which will incorporate the learnings from today's expert discussions. We'll begin with a very short, sharp scene-setting presentation by my colleague, Sean Radka. And then we'll move on to the interactive panel, which will last about an hour. After the panel, we'll take questions from the audience for our experts, and we'll wrap up by 4 p.m. This session is being recorded. It is being live streamed on YouTube and will be available on Esqua's website. Towards the end of the session, we'll be distributing evaluation forms to collect your feedback on the session and its effectiveness. Without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to my colleague, Sean, for the scene-setting presentation.
Thank you very much, Omar. So today's presentation will briefly cover the role of blockchain in the sustainable energy transition in the Arab region. So I'll briefly cover a few areas. I know some of us in the room are experts in the field, but we also have some in the audience who may have never heard of blockchain or are maybe just familiar with Bitcoin, but not the underlying technology. So first and foremost, what is blockchain? What role can it play? Select use cases, challenges to adoption and implementation, and then some conclusions and recommendations from Esqua's upcoming technical paper. So what is blockchain? We've probably all heard of cryptocurrencies that run on blockchain, but there are many other applications for this underlying technology that are much more interesting, in my opinion, particularly in the energy sector. So at its core, blockchain is a secure database shared across a network of participants where up-to-date information is available to all participants at the same time. If you've ever used a shared Word document on Teams or a Google Doc, maybe you have some experience with sort of everyone being on the same file and having access to the exact same thing at the same time. Instead of your own copy, everyone has the exact same copy, and you see everyone making changes in real time at the same time. And there's some shared and unified truth there. The difference is that with blockchain, there's no intermediary like Microsoft or Google in the middle. It's just that everyone on the network has a copy of this data. And we're going to hear a bit more about that from our experts on the panel today. So blockchain makes it possible to exchange anything that has value, whether that is a physical item or something less tangible like electricity. Importantly, blockchain can cut out the need for a middleman for transactions, even when multiple parties may not know or trust one another. So this can improve speed and efficiency while reducing costs. And I know if you were here with us yesterday, the keynote presentation mentioned Ethereum many times. And just for reference, that network processes about 1 million transactions every day. So our colleague from EnergyWeb might be kind enough to walk us through some of the differences between public and private blockchains and why it's important to choose the right blockchain for each use case, as opposed to a one-size-fits-all. I see him nodding, so I think he agrees to discuss that with us today. So coming back to energy, electric power systems around the world are rapidly changing. From a top-down grid model with one electricity producer and many consumers to a decentralized model where there are now also many small-scale generators as well, with power and payments flowing both ways, up and down. So blockchain can really help to manage this complexity and has a potential role to play in helping to integrate renewables by automating processes and using things called smart contracts, thereby increasing power system flexibility and reducing transaction costs. So during the discussion, our colleague from IRENA is going to set the scene for us a bit in terms of this new energy system and why new technologies are required to manage this increasing complexity. So firstly, it's important to note that blockchain is a technology, not a panacea. We need to first identify areas where it actually makes sense to use decentralized solutions. And then you have to determine what type of blockchain would be most appropriate based on cost, speed, privacy, and other trade-offs. And hybrid approaches can often be more effective than simply substituting traditional databases with blockchain. So we see use cases around decentralized project finance, where crowdfunding via blockchain has enabled investors from around the world to invest in small-scale rural RE projects in developing countries with increased transparency and reduced costs. When it comes to renewable energy provenance, we see that blockchain is being used to ensure real-time matching of consumption with locally sourced clean energy, like EV charging, while providing a trusted audit trail. Blockchain also enables the use of smart contracts in the energy sector, and these are self-executing contracts with the terms of the agreement between the buyer and seller written directly into lines of code. So one example that I often use because I like it, it comes from Andreas Antonopoulos, if anyone knows him out there, but sort of whenever you use a vending machine, this is an example of sort of a dumb smart contract where you know if you put in $1, automatically you're going to get some product out, either a drink or something to eat. And this is sort of a digital version of that, where if A happens, then B happens automatically. And this is written into the code. You don't need a trusted intermediary to process the transaction. So I'll quickly mention a few use cases just to make this a bit more tangible for the audience. Some are from the Arab region and some are not, but they provide an example of what could also be implemented here given the right enabling environment. And I'm sure we'll hear more during the discussion, excuse me, as well. So this example comes from South Africa, where there is a severe lack of reliable electricity supply. It's a peer-to-peer solar leasing platform built on blockchain and enables global investors to own and lease solar cells to organizations like hospitals, apartment buildings, and neighborhoods in emerging markets with maintenance provided through local partners. So using decentralized finance, funds can be distributed as microloans to residents of low electrification communities, enabling them to gain affordable access to solar energy. Access to direct and low-cost financing, which unlocks capital from the global markets, is enabling small-scale off-grid consumers to install solar PV systems with little upfront costs. Instead, consumers pay a fixed rate for their renewable power to these global investors. So in South Africa, you can see there's 66 solar project crowd sales that have already been completed with investors across 180 countries and over 18 gigawatt hours of clean energy generated so far. Another case I'll mention quickly is the Dubai Electricity and Water Authority, which is using blockchain to automate processes and is also building out a national EV charging network built on blockchain to increase transparency and reduce costs compared to traditional systems. And this is part of the Emirates Blockchain Strategy 2021 and the Dubai Blockchain Strategy. And I think maybe Miroslav is the expert on what Dubai is doing, and he can enlighten us a bit during the discussion as well. So moving to Europe for another example, blockchain is being used to give EV owners and fleet operators the ability to choose their electricity supplier at public charging stations. For example, EV drivers may be willing to pay more to charge their cars if they know the power is renewable. So blockchain can give consumers confidence that the power they are consuming is sustainable. The last case I'll mention here today comes from the UAE, where Abu Dhabi's national oil company is using blockchain to certify the carbon intensity of products. The added transparency enabled by blockchain will allow independent regulators to certify the carbon intensity of products and give customers greater confidence when it comes to the carbon footprint of their fuel consumption because of the immutability and transparency possible with blockchain. So just a few of the main challenges identified by ESCWA in coordination with experts in the field. Some of you are on the call today and in person, thank you again. And I'll note that the upcoming technical paper on the topic goes into much more detail on these challenges and solutions. But just a sample of what we discovered was that insufficient policy and regulatory frameworks, infrastructure challenges, interoperability and compatibility with legacy systems, scalability, security, and cost, limited technical expertise and shortage of skilled workers, limited public awareness and acceptance, and cross-cutting challenges, such as political and economic instability, were some of the main challenges identified. And I would note that these are not at all unique to the region. Most countries face these challenges, including in Europe and the US, where regulations are trailing far behind innovations taking place in the private sector. So leading to a lot of uncertainty in terms of legality, which slows down innovation. Even in the US, you see Coinbase receiving notices from the SEC for what they're doing in terms of crypto. So, and finally, the main message from ESCWA's upcoming technical paper is that Arab countries can leverage blockchain technology as part of a toolbox of digital technologies to manage increasing energy sector complexity and increase rural energy access while pursuing a just, inclusive, and sustainable energy transition. Successful use cases are already being implemented globally and can be adapted and adopted within the region to accelerate progress. So listed here are a sample of the conclusions and recommendations from the report. to be finalized after today's workshop, after hearing from the experts, and we will also revise and improve these after today's meeting. So create a roadmap for the implementation of digital technologies, including blockchain in the energy and related sectors to encourage private sector participation and investment, to reduce uncertainty, invest in digital infrastructure and technology to promote digital skills and education through training, identify, adapt, and adopt best practices, including policy, regulation, and technologies from around the world, restructure energy markets and empower consumers to become prosumers by enabling smart metering, and increase public investment in clean energy and accelerate progress on renewable energy and regional integration. So with this, I'll hand over back to my colleague Omar to introduce our esteemed panelists, and then we'll begin the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you for the clear presentation, which sets the scene, introduces the blockchain briefly, and the applications and the relationship between blockchain and energy, sustainable energy. Now, Sean will be moderating a session which includes an ensemble panel of international esteemed experts. We will be joined by Mr. Francesco Boschel, Head of Innovation and End-Use Applications from IRENA. He'll be joining us virtually. Also, Mr. Miroslav Polzer, Founder and CEO of IAAI, Strategic Director, Climate Change Coalition. Also joining us virtually, Mr. Andres Shundup. That's correct. A project manager at Energy Web, Ms. Jessica Abed, founder and CEO of New Energy Consult, Mr. Jens Strucker, professor of information systems and digital energy management at the University of Beirut and director of the Fraunhofer Blockchain Lab. Again, hope I pronounced correctly. Mr. Samer Zawaidi, industrial fellow at Al Hussein Technical University, Jordan. And virtually, we will be joined by Mr. Hussein Hassani, Director of Data Science and Technology Innovation at IAAI. Again, Sean, the floor is yours, and good luck for a fruitful session.
Thank you very much, Omar. So now comes the fun part where you don't have to listen to me, you get to listen to the experts in this field. So I'd like to start, before we get into the role of blockchain, I'd like to ask Mr. Francisco Boschel from IRENA, what are some of the factors which have led to the increasing complexity of the energy sector that I briefly mentioned? I know we talked about decentralized generation and storage, decarbonization, electrification, and EVs, but set the scene for us in terms of why technologies like this may or may not be needed, and your view on this added complexity in the new energy system. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sean, and thanks for the invitation to contribute to this event. So what we are seeing in the energy transition centered around renewables is a change in the supply and demand of electricity. We focus only on the electricity sector, from a system where it was generation centralized and big consumers only consuming the electricity. Now, the change that we see with the decentralization is that instead of having a few big generation units, we may have hundreds of thousands of small generation units in the form of, for example, rooftop PV, generating electricity in different locations at different times, injecting electricity, not a medium or high voltage level, but low voltage level. And on the demand side, we are seeing an increase in the electrification of end-use demand with, for example, electric vehicles, heat pumps, etc. So a smaller demand, also located in different or more scattered geographically, as well as consuming electricity at different times, changing the load profile. So if it was already somehow complex to optimize a power system with centralized unit and fewer demand points, can you imagine how it's now to optimize electricity flows that can also go reverse? So now also with the prosumers can also inject electricity back to the system and manage congestion, peak demand, constraints, interconnections, etc. So the system is getting more complex. That's why digitalization is becoming so important to be able to really manage, optimize, and operate these systems. Now, when we talk about digitalization, it's a very broad term with many technologies, for example, digital twins, chatbot, virtual augmented reality, etc. But what we see in IRENA as key technologies, emerging digital technologies to optimize and help to maintain these power systems with mainly three key technologies. The first one is the Internet of Things. So now we have many devices that connected to these new generations, small generators, as well as demand points that can share information in terms of when something is being charged, when it's consumed, how much is generated, etc. Yeah? But to be able to use this data, the first thing that we need is to collect all this data and transmit this data to a server. So we need the Internet of Things to be able to collect and transfer all this data to a centralized brain, let's say. Now, the second one that we see is artificial intelligence, because now what do we do with all this big data? We need to make decisions, and we have to make, hopefully, intelligent decisions in real time, extremely quick. Yeah. So that is where we see the role for artificial intelligence to be able to learn how these decisions can be optimized as the system changes and making these decisions very quickly in real time. And the third point is that those decisions should end in transactions. Transactions, for example, is paying for charging my electric vehicle in certain point at certain time where the tariff is lower. Selling extra electricity generated by my solar PV to appear in my neighborhood, or etc. Yeah, selling a certificate for clean energy or renewable energy to a certain person. So these are not only electron transactions, but also monetary transactions. And these transactions should be done in real time, so very quickly, and in a transparent and secure way. And one of the tools that we see that can help to do these transactions is through a smart contract supported by blockchain technology. Yeah? So that is where we see that this complexity, increased complexity in the power system and the increased number of data points, decisions to be made, and transactions is leading to the use of digitalization. Now, it is not a question of whether we need it or not. It's clear it is needed because not optimizing with digital technologies, the power system will require more physical infrastructure, will require more cables, more transformers, etc., to manage uncontrolled loads. But if we use digital technologies, it means that the energy transition will cost us much less than with uncontrolled options. So there is no question whether we have or we should not, or we should use digital technologies. It's clear that as these energy transitions evolve and the number of transactions increase exponentially, we need these technologies and we need to optimize a lower cost for the energy transition. So this is where we see the importance of digital technologies, and in the specific case of blockchain, we see in managing all these transactions, particularly through smart contracts for certificates, renewal certificates for charging electric vehicle, for selling peer-to-peer electricity, etc. All of those are at the end transactions. So, and I stop here with the first part, Sean. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Francisco. I think that set the scene very well and provided us with a great overview that we can then build on. I take your point very well that this is happening whether we like it or not, this digitalization and decentralization, and we need to react accordingly in order to increase transparency, reduce costs, and increase efficiency as well. I just wanted to sort of allow Ms. Jessica Obeid to build on that a bit and give us a sort of perspective from the Arab region in terms of some of the things that you just mentioned, Francisco. And please, over to you, Ms. Jessica.
I'm going to have to repeat the centralization point because the power sector in Arab states is heavily centralized, but also state-owned, mostly state-owned, and it's a single buyer model. So the power market structure is a key challenge in the energy systems of the future, digitizations and others, because the way things are is that the governments have to end up kind of buying all this electricity, whatever is generated, whether that's produced by even independent producers. And mostly development in the sector and investments have had to rely on government spending, which means that we have a low ability to attract investments in the entire power sectors. Additionally, we have high losses, high inefficiencies, and that's mostly driven because of low investments in the transmission and distribution networks, which would also hinder digitization and future applications of complex energy systems. The lack of access to data, whereas it's very difficult to manage things that we do not have access to data to, and we're not heavily monitoring. So that's also another issue. And the way that things are, another key challenge is the political instability, economic instability in so many countries, which hinder any kind of future planning. And even if we do have policies and investment plans in place, it gets very difficult to implement any of this. And then we add to that another complexity. It's a lot of challenges, obviously, which are energy subsidies, fossil fuel subsidies, electricity subsidies, cross subsidies, which have historically hindered any kind of investments in clean technologies, digital technologies, and others. But it's easier to state all these challenges than to act upon them, because all of this is also linked to the political economy of the power structure and power sector and the energy systems in the Arab states. So we have to account for the political economy, for social contracts, and all of this in addressing all of that. But as you said, it's happening otherwise. So we need to start planning very early on and start implementation, so that it's not just a disruptor, and that we're actually, it's part of a vision for the Arab states.
Thank you very much. I think it's, as you mentioned, quite important to really keep abreast of the challenges so we know what we need to address to sort of achieve some of these things. It's great to talk about all these new innovations, but we need a real plan to address a lot of the challenges, which we hope to get into today with this session. So thank you very much with that. So we went from Bonn to Beirut, and now let's maybe go to Austria for Mr. Miroslav Polzer. So based on the overview that we've heard from Francisco and Jessica, in your view, what are some of the most promising use cases that maybe blockchain can help to do in terms of managing this increased complexity or addressing some of the challenges that Jessica mentioned? So maybe from what you've seen in Europe, but also your work with the Dubai Blockchain Center and the Climate Chain Coalition, Miroslav, if you can enlighten us a bit on maybe your view in terms of how this technology can be used a bit, given the environment in which we find ourselves.
So first, greetings everyone from Klagenfurt in Austria. It's a pleasure being with you. I would like to start by congratulating UN-ESCWA for taking the lead on this important topic and for working with IRENA, which is a key global institution for this needed global energy transition. And it's really the topic of harnessing a blockchain for just energy transition is really high potential for bringing wealth to the people in the Western Asian region, in the Arab countries, but also worldwide. And it is a key element of the pathway towards global climate goals implementation, where we need a much more rapid action and impact. So in terms of use cases, you have, Sean, you have already mentioned several of them, and other colleagues. It is smart grid management is a very important area for the deployment of blockchain. It's energy trading with this great possibilities of peer-to-peer energy markets and integration of decentralized energy production systems. And there is this very important area, renewable energy certificates, carbon credits, where especially the members of my organization, the Climate Change Coalition, are very active. Also, people in the region. It's electric vehicles, charging infrastructure, and decentralized finance are some of the most important use cases which are globally relevant, and they are also relevant in the region. What I would like to highlight in my intervention is that blockchain, beyond these specific use cases, one can look at blockchain as an enabler of systemic transformation. It's really the action space that these cryptocurrencies and also governance tools based on blockchain and tokenization possibilities, digital assets creation from action and impact, that this is really changing a lot and opening up total new spaces for new business models, for new social innovations, for public sector innovation. And this is an area where the Western Asian countries, Arab countries are kindly invited to become more active in. So as I've mentioned already, the Climate Change Coalition, and I've shared here in the chat box the URL of our organization. It is the first and the biggest organization in the field of how to using blockchain technology for climate action empowerment. It was co-founded by the UN Climate Change Secretariat in December 2017. We have more than 360 members, and our members are working on combinations of Internet of Things technology and blockchain technology for digital measurement, reporting, and verification. We have people working on registries, on carbon markets, in very many areas. And in the second link that I've shared, you will see that among our members, there are not many members from the Western Asian region. And it's also something that we have observed because Sean has mentioned that I'm active with the Climate Change Coalition and with my main NGO, IAI. We are very active in the United Arab Emirates since last year in the run-up to the UN Climate Conference, COP28, which will be in December this year in Dubai. And we see there a big opportunity that this topic of digital innovation for climate, digital innovation for just energy transition could be somehow a flagship topic, and that there would be opportunity for the region and especially for the UAE and Dubai to shine. But despite the fact that Dubai, UAE is one of the most dynamic crypto hubs in the world, and also a lot of regulation already in place, and very many ecosystem development there. The area of using blockchain for impact, blockchain for SDGs or for climate goals is not yet so developed. And so we have had there last year during the UN Climate Change MENA Regional Climate Week, first networking event on blockchain for climate with UNEP, and also IRENA and UNESCO has been involved. And so my message here is that we have to work together. We have to bring together all the stakeholders, the blockchain solution developers, the people who are active in the energy sector, people who are regulating the energy sectors, people in taxation systems, because a key enabler for enhanced just energy transition is carbon pricing or other instruments that are fixing the market failures. Yeah, and here blockchain technology can help with the attribution of carbon footprints or provenance management, and helping to develop the right develop and implement the right regulatory and market instruments that just energy transition is being possible. This is the first statement. We will come later with more information about an area where I see also blockchain technology very prominently opening up new opportunities. It's in the field of citizens engagement, youth sustainable energy entrepreneurship business models enabled by blockchain technology, and our expertise or experience and tools that we have there with the Just Energy Transition for Central Europe project, on which Hossein Hassani, my colleague, is working. But I think I will stop here for the beginning, just saying the topic, the opportunities are huge, but the people, the relevant stakeholders in the region should also engage more in the global networks that are existing, because we can learn from one another, and there are very similar challenges around the world. One specific challenge that I would wanted to mention is also that, for instance, in Egypt, the use of cryptocurrencies is banned because it's not Sharia compliant. And then I've looked up today the status of where the regulatory framework for the use of cryptocurrencies in Arab region and North Africa and so is allowed, and there is really a lot of work that needs to be done to really bring these societies, these economies into the realities of the new Web 3.0 reality, and all the opportunities, the wealth generation and job creation opportunities of the blockchain and other Web 3.0 technologies. And this give back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There's a lot to unpack there, and I think I'll definitely come back to you later in this discussion to unpack a bit of that. I liked your point on increasing participation and engagement in the region as really an enabler, because as you mentioned, a lot of the use cases that we are seeing globally can definitely be implemented in the region if we increase awareness and if we tackle certain challenges in terms of the regulatory aspects and things like that. So I think increasing engagement and the participatory nature of this is quite important, and working together, you also mentioned. I want to bring it a little back down to earth here by asking Mr. Andreas Schondub here in Beirut, if you can sort of talk us through the different types of blockchains and maybe some of the pros and cons of each, so that we can make this a bit more tangible for some of the people in this meeting today that might not fully understand the technology. If you can sort of give us a flavor of that, the differences between these blockchains and why certain blockchains might be more useful for certain use cases.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting us, and to all the attendees. I think it's great that there's interest in this topic. I think that it's important to note that we're talking about networks, and the way in which networks are organized, just as organizations or countries. Well, you start with setting up governance, and these mechanisms, which are also referred to as consensus mechanisms, are really the rules and the regulations, or the bylaws in the case of companies. So for blockchains, you have consensus mechanisms which govern how blockchains are structured. And yes, there's private and there's public blockchains, and one of or how you can distinguish them by looking at how they're structured. For example, public blockchains are generally public in the sense that you can access the data, you can push data, you can read the data, and you can also become a validator in that specific blockchain, whereas public blockchains are the opposite of that. So the data might remain private to the specific organizations using that blockchain, and access to becoming a validator in the blockchain is also private. And I can put Energy Web Chain's example. If you don't know Energy Web, we're an organization, a nonprofit organization that developed a blockchain specifically for the energy sector. And so the way in which it was designed was that the readability, the access to the blockchain, the content would be available and transparent to everyone, including external companies that do not validate. But we wanted to keep validators and the companies validating blocks on the Energy Web Chain as energy companies, because again, Energy Web since its beginning was targeted or had the objective of exploring blockchain in the energy industry, and that's why it developed the Energy Web Chain catered for the energy sector.
Thank you. I was going to come back to you and ask a follow-up, because in my first presentation, I sort of mentioned this Volkswagen use case study that's sort of building on Energy Web Chain. And I guess my question is, how can companies sort of use blockchain? What's the first step that they need to take? Do they email Energy Web and they say, we want to build something on blockchain, we think we have a good use case? How can we work to sort of put this into practice, and does it even make sense? So how is the process for that in terms of the learning from maybe private companies or governments that are thinking, you know, I've heard a lot about this, it could have benefits for us. You know, what's a way that they can get more information, or how they can actually move forward in this? If you can sort of tell us a bit about that.
Sure, definitely. So first of all, I think that a really important thing to consider is to validate whether blockchain is needed or not. I think several panelists already mentioned that it's just only one component of a set of tools that can be used. So validation is very important, because it will make the process more efficient. And we generally have meetings that last months in which we define the scope. However, if we were to simplify how this looks, we often have certain thresholds, and you can think of it in a binary way, or a checkbox, where if you have multiple companies, well, you can check a box. So multiple stakeholders engaging between themselves. If you have the need to validate and the need to verify the data and to transact data between this different stakeholders, you can check another box. If you also have the need to audit the data and the output of this business processes, you can also check another box. And once you've validated, well, you then have to check the policy, the regulations, the incentive mechanisms. So for startups, for governments, I think that having these technical roadmaps or innovation roadmaps, and having financing mechanisms for startups to participate in test environments and hackathons and so on, it's really helpful to get more companies participating in exploring different use cases involving blockchain.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think that what we've heard from our stakeholders as well is that knowledge gap is really sort of a barrier, because maybe they don't know about blockchain, or they do, but they really don't know how it can even be useful or where to even start. Because perhaps, as you mentioned, you know, it's just one tool as part of a toolbox, and maybe it's not even necessary. So I think where to even start is often one of the problems. before I go to Samir, who I know maybe is anxious to talk about some of the challenges to implementing some of these technologies, I see him smiling over there. I want to first just go to Mr. Jens Tulker, Professor of Information Systems and Digital Energy at the University of Beirut and Director of the Fraunhofer Blockchain Lab, to maybe just quickly reflect on some of the things that we've heard so far. And based on your work at the Fraunhofer Blockchain Lab, maybe what do you see as some of the most promising use cases for blockchain technology in the energy sector, perhaps that you've seen in Europe that could be adapted and adopted in the region? Please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sean. And of course, I will try to reflect a little bit of what we heard. So over the last years, I've supervised a lot of publicly and industry-funded blockchain projects. And we authored a couple of studies, etc., for the German Association of Energy and Water Industry with more than 1,800 companies, and also for the German Energy Agency, and not mentioning a dozen of pilot projects in the energy sectors. And I'm also familiar with Energy Web, of course. So what I learned over the last, I would say, 7-8 years is in the sector is doing real projects there. One thing is decarbonization means electrification, means a magnitude more of energy assets. So energy assets in the systems. This means we need to integrate prosumers, all kinds of flexible electricity demand. That's the status we have in Europe, UK, US, in a couple of countries where the decarbonization, or where we have already a lot of renewables in the system. And with all these EVs, PVs, heat pumps, batteries, etc., there comes, of course, the problem of we have more objects, then we need more coordination, and this means more data exchange. The real problem here then is when we open the system, this means we have all kinds of new objects here. We shift from operation technology to information technology. That happened before in other industries, in other domains, but now we have that situation in the energy system. And this is critical because we have a critical infrastructure here. It's risky. If you can hack a transformer, if you can, as an attacker, you can claim to be, I don't know, 1 million EVs, we all can imagine what does it mean for the grid. So grid operators have to react, and then we see a couple of problems here. So the challenge is, how can we really exchange unchanged data between untrustworthy parties? Because first of all, we have to identify them. And how we can do this, we think that we need a paradigm shift in thinking about the operating of electricity systems in general. And this means one paradigm here is, or a new paradigm is, we call that don't trust, verify. Now this means we need no trust architectures. So a couple of countries in Europe already did this, or they shifted their policy there. The US already did. And this is where blockchain, of course, comes into the play here. And this is interesting because blockchain has a new database paradigm here, is really in the core, from my perspective, a solution to the double spending problem, of course. Yeah. And I would say then, if we realize that blockchain there can be part of a solution, at that point, we can make all the new flexible devices, assets there from the bug to a feature, meaning we can really integrate the flexibilities here. But this is challenging, of course, again, because then we have to come to a situation where we can automatically switch the roles of assets, the flexibilities, what we want to integrate into the market. This could be a big PV plant. This can be a couple of EVs, heat pumps, etc. But if you want to switch really from the role of you use your own energy, then you feed in because you get money for, you're incentivized to take a role part in of the ancillary services, and then you switch back to, or then to a local market, or a national or regional market, whatever. This can be very, very useful for the energy system from a economic side, it's efficient. It's definitely, it makes a lot of sense to integrate these energy flexibility. This means, of course, this is part of the decarbonization part. We want to fulfill a couple of SDGs here. But the thing is here, we have to identify the objects, because what the blockchain cannot do is, this is the so-called, we all know that the so-called Oracle problem. We really have to have kind of machine identities or digital identities behind the meter. This means the assets have to be also directly part of the energy systems. And we have projects there, and it's my statement here to answer your question. We have a couple of projects now with transmission grid operators, with companies that want to really manage congestion, also with small devices, because that's the challenge at the end of the day. At the beginning, you can say, okay, we do not have so many EVs, it's not so many PV installation or batteries there. But over time, we will see, and this happened in Europe, of course, devices or assets lower than 100 kilowatt behind the meter. Now we have the real challenges here, and we have to integrate them. So this means one use case here definitely in the future is Redispatch 3.0, we call it, with small devices assets here. Then we already heard tokenization and the question of guarantees of origin for green electricity, but also certificates here also for hydrogen. I think is a very good use case. We see that all over the world right now popping up here. Use cases, really good ones. Yeah, and we can talk about all the different use cases in detail, of course, by I think Redispatch 3.0, market integration, peer-to-peer trading. Maybe we will see that. I think this will take a little while. But then sharing investments, of course, is also a very interesting point here, because it's not all about the operation of a system, but it's also the investment. How can we really engage? How can we accelerate the decarbonization process? So this also means how can we invest very smartly? So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Jens. I just had one maybe point of clarification. You mentioned blockchain cannot solve the Oracle problem. So are you referring to the fact that, taking real-time information from the real world and sort of putting it on chain, we need to verify and make sure that's correct in some way in real time? Or maybe if you can just unpack very quickly in a minute what you mean by this Oracle problem, because we hear oftentimes, this connection from the dry world to the wet world, or how they say it with, putting information on blockchain. It's the garbage in, garbage out problem, where if you don't know that it's correct, maybe just unpack that just a bit for us, please.
So to give you an example, and you're totally right, this is what I meant. So imagine an e-vehicle. So you say you are situated in Belgium, and say, I want to drive to Germany or France, for instance. And then all of a sudden, your car pops up in a totally different grid. And then you want to charge. And then we have a request from an operator, the grid operator, and let's imagine we have a signal in the grid, and we know, okay, now we could have a congestion here at that point. And one option is you give the signal, say, okay, you cannot load, or you can say, okay, I'm a car, and I can prove that I'm a car. And this is the problem here. If a grid operator do not identify you and all the other information are on a blockchain, then it doesn't matter. So this is really, you can claim you are this car, you claim you are a car, but you are maybe not. And this is critical. So the information that goes into a blockchain, into a registry or whatever, means we have to verify that. So we need digital identities. And also the other way around. If you think about green electricity, so you have situation, a generator, and then you feed into the grid, you have to prove that. And on the other side, if you say, I have a digital twin, or I imagine it's like a digital passport for electricity, and you always write, or you do a hash and write the hash onto a blockchain. And then you combine that, and at the end, you have the consumption of electricity with the device. But then at the end, you still have to prove that you at that time you consumed electricity, because otherwise we could not prove the entire chain of events, because still we cannot take electrons. I don't know who is working on that, but yeah, it's unsolved, so there's no way around that.
Thank you. I think what we're hearing today, the theme is really that blockchain is just really one aspect of this transition. So we need, digital identities, like you mentioned, but also IoT devices that are perhaps standardized and secure, that Franziska Buschel mentioned in the beginning. So I think so far that's the main takeaway. Thank you very much. And I wanted to turn back to Beirut to talk to Mr. Samer Zawaida. So we talk a lot about the UAE when it comes to implementing blockchain technology in the region. We've heard about it many times. So far, from the opening presentation, but also from Miroslav and others. So how can this technology be more implemented, also in developing countries in the region to, not only increase energy sector efficiency, but perhaps also access? And sort of maybe what are the challenges that you see in your career, and what you would want to reflect on in terms of what you've seen so far? Please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Sheen, and big thanks to the ESCWA for leading this discussion and organizing this workshop. Actually, electricity is old. We have electricity law, and when you want to change this law, it's tough. So we have the regulations. The most important thing is to have a regulation. So you need to develop new regulations for the blockchain, and that's tough because the blockchain is integrating different sectors. So we're not only talking about the energy sector, we're also talking about the internet. You need very strong internet, high-speed internet, and that is related to a different sector. So you need to bring these two sectors, and that's not enough. We also need data collection, data storage, and you need cybersecurity. So that the cybersecurity is another sector that you have to integrate here. So you have minimum 3 different spheres that you have to integrate in order to bring this forward. And you can imagine how many stakeholders are involved, how many years you need to spend in order to fine-tune and bring them all together to solve these things. When we talk about technical infrastructure, our colleagues online, they were mentioning Dubai, and of course, not all countries in the Arab world or around the world, they have the same infrastructure. So you need very good infrastructure. You need stable power, 24/7, 365. You need stable internet throughout the year. And of course, you need new hardware, and all of these things are not affordable to all the countries in the world. So these are big challenges. Now, when we talk about awareness and training, now this is a very new topic. And when you want to bring this topic to the old generation, the people who are already existing and working the grid for 20, 30 years, this is not easy. So this is a different mentality, and you have to upgrade let's say, I would say, teach the new generation within maybe 5-7 years. You will have a strong professional energy engineers, data engineers, cybersecurity engineers who know how to integrate all of this together. So this is going to take time, really. And right now we're working together on regional integration of the electricity grid. So we're talking about sharing electricity between the MENA region. And now when you, for example, each country, they have their own grid, and then they have their own blockchain. And then you're talking about more complicated integration of all of these blockchains. And we also have some cultural challenges because everybody likes their own security, and they trust the old systems. So when you want to migrate into new systems, this is also a big challenge. Now, when you start with pilot project, let's say the energy consumption would be for the blockchain would be small. But when you go big and you start working on the, let's say, city scale, then this system will need energy. And now, how are you going to convince the decision makers that I want to consume this energy for this system? So just to let you know where I come from in Jordan, we have about 6% losses in the grid. This is due to theft. So this 6% means out of 20,000 gigawatt hours, we're talking about 100 million to 150 million USD per year on losses. This is theft. So if you can convince the stakeholder decision makers that this technology will be able to reduce this theft, then you have an economical let's say a cost benefit, and you have an economical valid argument that you can put forward and convince the decision maker. But otherwise, if you can't do this calculations, then it'll be tough to explain all of this, let's say, new energy coming into the market. Also, the integrations with the existing systems is not easy, and that will take time. But I would like to also emphasize that this is there is an opportunity that somebody mentioned before, but I want to stress again, which is the crowdfunding. Because we have energy poverty throughout the world, so you can do crowdfunding to bring in money to help the people and in the energy poverty areas, and this will solve problems. So you can do microgrid, and you can build everything, and then you can provide them with this system, and you can develop the RECs. And I think each REC right now is 1 megawatt hour, and each one mega peak would produce 2 gigawatt hour in Jordan. So for each 1 mega, you can produce 2,000 RECs, and you can sell it for $5. So this is $10,000 US. So there is a economical, let's say, case. But this all of this is new, and when you want to put this on the table and start implementing, you need really strong stakeholders like the international banks, the EIB or the World Bank, or somebody who is can study all these risks and challenges and then move them forward. So I hope I didn't say too much and within the time limit. Thank you very much, Ian.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about infrastructure and also cybersecurity, which I know Jens touched on quickly, and I wanted to unpack that a bit more. But also you mentioned sort of the risk-averse nature perhaps in the energy sector, because if the lights go out or something, maybe the Minister of Energy loses their job or something like that. So maybe they don't want to take chances with these new technologies. So maybe just in 1 minute, if you could, Samir, what would be the best, maybe most effective way to sort of, raise awareness or maybe educate decision makers or policy makers about these new technologies, maybe not even just blockchain, but just within this overall end-to-end digitalization that we're seeing in the energy sectors? What is the best way to maybe reach these decision makers to show that there are new ways that can increase efficiency, that can maybe reduce theft that you mentioned before? Maybe just if you have any thoughts on that.
Yes, in my case, I would say about the decision makers in Jordan, they are aware of blockchain. It is on the table. We have teams studying, but moving forward, it's complicated. I would definitely say that we need a pilot project in each country, and this pilot project will provide confidence that it will eliminate the risk. So you have the theory world and you have the practical world. I come from the practical world, but I teach the student, I teach the theory. So whatever works on the ground, we need to see projects that work on the ground. So if we can make the economical case, and also in order to provide that case, you need also regulations. You need we have in place something called the PPP. I know Laura talked about it yesterday. We have a public-private partnership law in Jordan, which is law number 17 for year 2020, but they are talking about projects over 10 million. So whether we want to work on blockchain for the big cities, or we want to work on blockchain for the poverty pockets, we have to decide that. And maybe doing a microgrid for, let's say, areas away from the grid in different countries, and seeing the different risks and evaluating that. And I would say this is a first step. Then we can move into integration into the existing system. So definitely, I would say, do your job, study it well, and do the pilot project first, and then we move into integration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Before I move to Mr. Hossein Hassani, I just was wondering if Andres Shondub, if you want to just quickly sort of react. I'm curious myself, and if we don't have the answer, that's totally fine. If EnergyWeb is doing any work with governments to sort of raise awareness and use these new technologies, or is it mainly working with, private sector startups that use these new technologies? I'm just kind of curious if the awareness raising is part of your portfolio as well.
No, yeah, that's I think that. As Samer was mentioning, you have to start somewhere, and we engage with many, both regulators, academia, startups, and companies themselves. And I think that examples of this engagement, I think Jens, who was mentioning a project with DINA, so the German Energy Agency, we're collaborating with the German Energy Agency. We've also we participate in European Union funded projects. So we also have joined EU funded projects. And I think that you just have to prepare or to provide this environment where you have companies talking to each other, also governments in the room and startups. I mean, many of these EU projects require startup participation or SMEs to get into these projects. So I think that you just need the right environment in place to get the ball rolling.
Thank you very much. I wanted to go now to Mr. Hossein Hassani. Perhaps you can also reflect on, I know it's been maybe 45 minutes of comments if you want to reflect also, but I wanted to ask you if you have any insights you could share on how regulation and policy in the UAE has sort of spurred implementation of the technology, and if that can be sort of replicated throughout the Arab region, and if you have any experience within the Arab region with, what use cases have really taken off and what some of the challenges have been, and how these challenges may have been overcome or can be overcome in the future. So if you'd like to respond to anything else as well, please feel free to go ahead. Mr. Hassani, the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, maybe some of the colleagues or participants from different parts of the world, they are joining us. I would let me start by thanking SQUAB for this initiative, and also my esteemed colleague, Sean, and other colleague that they are organizing this. and also esteemed panelists for sharing their knowledge, wisdom, and also comment regarding this particular issue. You kindly mentioned about the UAE. I think they are leading in this area, regulation, as my esteemed colleague, Dr. Polzda mentioned. In many fronts, they are leading this and could be role model for other countries as well. But of course, there are challenges, like my esteemed panelist mentioned. And I would like to bring and extract, like data mining as a statistician, couple of the words that you kindly mentioned. Back into the energy poverty, we're looking at the SDG 7 and a couple of statistics, if we refer to it here. We are talking about 770 million, roughly about 800 million lack of access to electricity. At the same time, if we look at the definition by several criteria, we are talking about 2 billion. If you look at the proper definition for access to clean and affordable, particularly I would like to use this word according to the UN, for the energy. And we are looking at the transition at the same time. So to me, how blockchain can help us for this transition. Particularly if you look at the UI that you mentioned, we have a system at the place now, energy system in total. So we are moving, we are transition means we are going to have another system. Are we ready to switch to another system? And because the topic here is a blockchain and how blockchain facilitate this transition much smoother. So the backbone of many things that you mentioned, and my sister here, our colleague mentioned as well, the data issue that we have. The backbone of all of this and also decision making is the data. Do we have enough data at the moment? And what the blockchain to me bring to this, it helps us to create a transparent situation that we can generate data much easier, much better, but at the same time, more transparent. One of the key aspects, perhaps I would like to add to those other comments that my colleague mentioned, is the issue of data security, at the same time confidentiality. And we have lots of law here, like GDPR or lots of other data confidentiality. And I would like to refer to the new approval of the UN. It was months ago, after 2 years' work, about the data governance. And many of the issue that we mentioned here, it goes under this important rule, because you mentioned I need to a little bit tackle about the regulation that we have here. So now we have a mandate that country needs to implement about the data as well. And blockchain will help us to tackle one of the particular aspects of this, which we are talking about the data privacy and confidentiality. So blockchain help us here as well. And I would like to mention a couple of more important points here as well. But back to the one of the comment that Dr. Polzda mentioned about the citizen science. We are talking about transition and youth as well. So, and incentive. To me, any system that we are talking in academia, my colleague Jens kindly mentioned he's from academia as like me. What we do in academia, we would like to see the impact in the street. And we need to incentivize system. We need to have a very incentivized system. Tokenization is one of the aspects that fortunately will be provided by blockchain. Back to the project that we, just one example that you mentioned about case study, part of the project that I'm very proud of it, to be part of it, that IEA is doing. For the first time, we are creating a system or platform that we can listen to the citizen, to their voice, to be part of this energy transition by sharing the concern, by not only the concern and what they see as a challenge for this transition, as a challenge for this climate, but also from policymaker perspective, we talk about lots of what we need to hear, the voice of the citizen. We are preparing this platform, their voice to be heard by policymaker, by government, and the project is going to be applied by 12 countries in Europe. So this project, how the blockchain then came in. What we foresee here to bring in blockchain as a layer on top of the data that we have, one element is we get rid of or eliminate as much as we can the issue of confidentiality and GDPR issue that we have in Europe. That can be applied with a different name, regulation, and customization in the various parts of the world. The second part is we are incentivize citizens by voting, by tokenization, by rewarding them. That's the blockchain help us to have this. At the same time, to me, what is quite important for the world with the lots of technology that we have, and also as a data provider, because we are the data provider. You kindly mentioned digital twin, IoT, which the device they are providing the data, but the blockchain, what it can provide a solution for this is we are as a citizen the owner of the data, and that's currently is missing in the society. That's why we hear lots about different European situation that they have with the big tech now. So blockchain give us this advantage as well and help us to be the ownership, data ownership back to the data provider. And to me, it helps us much easier, much better for this transition. My esteemed colleague mentioned about, say, selling the energy or providing energy or contract or energy sharing, and all of these matter. Yeah, that these are quite a great idea, but at the same time, confidentiality is quite important within the system and out of the system. And here is the blockchain advantage that help us. Of course, there are many challenges, like it could be private blockchain, or it could be public, that public everybody knows about Bitcoin like that, or it could be hybrid, or it could be consortium. And to me, that depends on the country and the region that we are talking. We are talking about the transition and all of this SDG, if we look at is for all. We talk about energy for all, transition for all. So these for all, to me, there is no one unique solution because we need to include all. Different region, different country, different culture needs customization of one big issue that we need to prepare for the transition. And some of these challenges could be tackled by blockchain. And back to the your comment at the beginning, UAE is leading to resolve some of these challenges, but we should work together and also other countries with a big international organization to facilitate this issue. I would like to stop here. Perhaps I leave a room for Q&A. I'm sure there would be lots of Q&A. I would be more than happy to discuss this. Please, back to you.
Thank you very much. Again, I think that was really quite on point when you talked about the customization and really the data privacy issues. You mentioned GDPR and how blockchain could either be a liability because of this, or it could actually be an asset, depending on the type of blockchain you use, and really making sure the technology is fit for purpose, as there's no one size fits all sort of technology. And I think you also noted well that one of the main challenges is it's difficult to scale these sort of technologies or use cases because the regulations are very different country by country or region by region. So in terms of data privacy, it's very different than other things as well. I wanted to go do Francisco Boschel, but I know that our colleague here, Miss Jessica Ovaid, has been writing some notes down, and I think she would be well placed to sort of reflect on some of what we heard just now. So please, Jessica, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, I've taken a lot of notes. So when I reflect on some of the points, especially in terms of pilot projects, because And I want to reflect on the experience of ASQA, because ASQA has typically been doing follow-ups and monitoring on pilot projects. And I find this very important because we want to deduct the lessons learned from pilot projects and make sure we actually mainstream them through policies and have them throughout the policies in terms of what we learned, what should have been better, what we could have done in a different way. And I find this very relevant for this. And some of the low-hanging fruits in the Arab states is that although most countries are 100% or at least almost 100% electrified, we still find low access to electricity in many places, post-conflict countries, but also in rural areas where we still have a high reliance on diesel generators. And that means not only pollution, but also expensive electricity that reduces competitiveness of productive activities in this area. So these could be low-hanging fruits for applications. And in terms of how we can use pilot projects for policies, we do not have policy frameworks or regulation, not only for digitization and blockchain, but also in so many countries, we don't even have regulations for distributed renewable energy, which should take place. And having kind of distributed models is very complex in the current context. But starting in places where electricity is needed could actually facilitate some of this. And when we look into also some of the energy projects and initiatives in development agencies and the humanitarian aid agencies, in terms of energy components, we sometimes find that they do not necessarily meet the needs of the local population, or there's a replication. So also having these kind of blockchain technologies can help mitigate some of these things in delivering and making sure that aid in energy is actually addressing having sustainable kind of energy systems through aid energy interventions. And the last thing it was in my notes, was that youth was brought up a few times, and we have in the Middle East, some of the largest share of youth population in the world is actually in the Middle East. And we need job creation, and we need entrepreneurship and even innovation for all these systems. But when I look into the culture, we're a culture that heavily penalizes failure, which makes it very difficult for youth. It makes youth population mostly risk averse, and starting a company, starting a startup could be very expensive, and there's so much bureaucracy linked to it. So we need also to think of these things that would impact innovation and data sharing, because as Samer has mentioned, each country likes to do their things on their own, and each research center on their own, but we're going to need a lot of collaboration. And I think my key takeaway for this is that we also need a lot of collaboration. It's not just about the technology and how we deploy it, but we need the collaboration on a high level and on a large level, regional level, and data sharing for us to enable all of these things.
Thank you very much. Not everyone can see, but her notes are much more comprehensive than mine. I might steal these for the closing. I really think what you said is right, as in, not putting the cart before the horse, where we're sort of addressing blockchain, but we're ignoring the fact that, access is important, electrification is important, and we need to tackle these challenges. And if we take a holistic view, we can use new technologies for this purpose. And also, identifying the low-hanging fruit and then initiating pilot projects to really show that they can work. Because as Samer mentioned, governments need to see that pilot projects are working for them to take the leap to actually sort of start implementing. So thank you very much for that comment. I wanted to jump back to Bonn, Germany, to Mr. Francisco Boschel, to sort of maybe walk us through what role intergovernmental organizations like ESQA and IRENA can play in helping member states, identify how to sort of move forward in this end-to-end digitalization that's happening in the energy sector, whether it be implementing technologies like blockchain or IoT or digital twins, as you mentioned, or as Jens was talking about digital identity. What can organizations like ours do in terms of helping member states, whether they be global? I know your member states are global, or in the Arab region for ESQA particularly. What are sort of the ways that we can help them efficiently move forward in this new future that we find ourselves with these complex digital energy sectors?
Thank you, Sean. So I think intergovernmental organizations have a big role to play in helping our member countries to better understand the role and the benefits of, in this case, these digital technologies. I think that what we receive as feedback from our member countries is that this energy transition is going very fast, pushed by the climate change agenda, but beyond that, due to also energy access, sustainable development goals, energy security, etc. And policymakers are keen to accelerate the pace and use innovation. The problem is that they are also a little bit overwhelmed with many messages, you know, like, okay, digitalization is critical, blockchain technology is critical, and the next day, okay, blockchain is obsolete, let's go for Ethereum. Oh no, next day, oh no, Ethereum consumes less energy, but this is still too complex, let's go for another one. And they're like, okay, please, can someone tell me what is relevant for my country? How can I use it? And what are the benefits? So I think there is still, and that's what we are trying to do with initiatives like our Innovation Week, Innovation Landscape Report, is to try to distill these innovations and create toolboxes around these innovations that can be tailored to every country. Because let's remember, and we have heard from the different panelists, and also the great summary that we heard just now, that every country is different. They have different endowment of natural resources, market regulation, etc. And we need to adapt these technologies to better suit, better cater the different countries. So that's one thing to explain and guide how this can be used. The second is, of course, the exchange between governments of lessons learned and good practices. So definitely everyone, or well, many countries are trying to implement different digital technologies for different applications. There are already pilot projects in many countries, and it's great to promote and facilitate this exchange. And the third point is also engaging not only government, but then the scientific community, the citizens, as well as the industry, to have a dialogue on, okay, as a government, what do I see as the benefit for these technologies, and what do I expect from these technologies? From the industry perspective, okay, what do I expect from policymakers to enable the growth of this technology or the uptake of this technology in a secure way, but also that creates the revenues that will allow me to have a business model around it. And of course, the communities and our citizens to say, okay, but let's keep in mind that we need also to ensure the sustainability as well as if possible, economic growth, job creation, access to energy, etc. So I think it's important to bring all these elements together. And I think that our IGOs, our organizations, have a big role to play to bring all these different actors, scientific community, industry, citizens and governments together to discuss this way forward.
Thank you very much, Francisco. I think that's right on point. What's relevant for my country? How can I use it? How will it benefit me? And really clearly identifying and sort of sharing these benefits with our member states, I think really is the first step. And then, as you mentioned, exchanging of info between governments, engaging the scientific community, citizens, and average people. I think really we have a lot of work to do, but all those points I think make sense. And I wanted to shift over to Miroslav to sort of maybe answer the same question in terms of the view of IAAI and what you're doing to sort of educate governments on this new sort of digital energy sector and the end-to-end digitalization and these new tools, and how you see this as well. And any reflections you have on any of the comments from other speakers. Miroslav, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. So at IAI and the Climate Change Coalition, we believe that the UNFCCC process is a very important space in which a lot of this awareness raising and capacity building and skills development can happen. And we believe that the COP28 conference this year will be really the most important event in the MENA region as regards climate action, as regards just energy transition. And so our bets are on the COP28, and we try to build momentum there and being present there, and bringing success stories, bringing solution providers there, so that people can see what works and even to express concerns if there are certain things not working. And I have we have there at the COP, we have a digital innovation pavilion. We've had it already last year at the COP27 in Egypt, where we are creating a space, a physical space, where the blockchain solution providers can come and present the solutions to those from the climate governance space, climate governance community, energy sector community, and also the climate action community, especially young people. So this is one way how we are building awareness, and how we are then, in addition to the space, the digital innovation pavilion, we have also press conferences, side events, networking events. We've had a networking event in the context of the UNFCCC process intersessional conference in Bonn on the 7th of June this year. We've had at the GIZ campus, the German Development Cooperation Program, hybrid event with 25 people in the room, another 20 joining virtually, where we've again presented solutions and raised awareness about these things. And it's also a way to work with these development cooperation partners. GIZ has a very strong digital transformation program, and they are developing a blockchain for climate program, and they have a data economy program. So this kind of partnerships are also, through them, we are reaching their partner countries as well, and can raise awareness, bring solutions there. And one thing that I've also, in terms of a concrete suggestion brought to in the chat window, I've mentioned and shared the link, that also at the Bonn UNFCCC climate conference SB58, we've had a press conference with Dubai World Trade Center, which is organizing the GITEX Global and GITEX Impact technology shows. It's one of the biggest on global level, one of the biggest technology shows. Last year they've had 175,000 visitors. This year they're expecting even more. And in this context, there's also a future blockchain summit. And my suggestion here would be, in Bonn we've announced that Climate Change Coalition, Dubai World Trade Center, and the Slovenian government, which has at the Dubai Expo City its pavilion, still from the Expo, and now which will be placed in the COP28 green zone, that we will have joint programs on blockchain for climate, digital innovation for climate. And a key element on the road to COP28 will be the future blockchain summit between the 15th and the 18th of October in the Dubai Marina. And my suggestion here is that UNESCO and IRENA and Climate Change Coalition, together with Dubai World Trade Center and other stakeholders, Dubai Blockchain Center, and perhaps also the Dubai Water and Energy Authority, because they have some good solutions already, or the World Green Economy Organization in Dubai, that we together organize a project and develop pilot projects for the Arab country regions. And one potential source of funding that we think we could jointly tap into, if we have UNESCO and IRENA as partners, would be also the OPEC Fund for International Development. So I think that we have a colleague who we worked with last year from the World Green Economy Organization, who has now moved to the OPEC Fund for International Development. And I think that they could be perhaps interested and cooperative for financing pilot projects in the region. Yeah, and we have also another thing where we are also raising awareness about this is we are organizing on the 14th and 15th of September at the UN headquarters in New York conference about co-creating the future with digital innovation. And one of the sessions will be also on blockchain for climate, blockchain for just energy transition, and potentially we could also collaborate on this. Yeah. Giving it back to you, Sean. It wasn't my specific work, but I think it's action-oriented and hopefully.
Yeah, thank you. I think that paints quite a broad picture of ways to increase engagement, really with not only governments, but with the public. And yeah, look forward to continuing our collaboration from ESCWA with your side. You mentioned pilot projects, and I know Jessica also mentioned low-hanging fruit. So I wanted to turn now to Mr. Jens Strucker to maybe walk us through, in your view, what you see as some of the low-hanging fruit that can be used to convince public and private stakeholders of perhaps the usefulness of blockchain technology within this energy sector digitalization. And again, any responses you would like to give to what you've heard so far. Jens, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I think one thing is as a grounding problem we have to solve here is where do we want to have a digital infrastructure, more on the public side or more on the private side? So this is one thing. I give you an example. If we talk about data, exchange of data, if you talk about master data, transaction data, then it's really important to be clear about that, because I think you do not want to do the same mistakes and make the same failures that we did in Europe or in most of the countries. Let me mention here, for instance, for master data, for assets. We have a registry for master data in Germany. We built that over the last years, but it was designed, when we started to design it and build it, it was already aged, old-fashioned. And now we see we have to have, from the beginning, we need a kind of master plan for what does it mean digital end-to-end energy system. So I would recommend to look at where can we put blockchain as a registry, for instance, not to store there all the transaction data. That's not a good idea. But for instance, to fingerprint data for green electricity, to do certificates for where does the energy comes from? Is it really green? How much CO2 is on it, etc. So I think we can bring that to people, and this could be very useful for them as well. And at the same time, you do something for the energy system, because if you can handle the data and you can clearly identify all the assets, you can better integrate them. So you can make money when you give electricity back or to your neighbor or to the system, and to stabilize the system here. I think that's important, but it has both sides. So the public part here, who's responsible for what? We have regulation there, we have a critical infrastructure, but on the other side, you want to give access to this system, and this is the IT side, and this means with smart meter gateways, this is the next thing we tried. Another failure we did in most countries, you looked at that like it's a kind of technology, and you sold it to people as, oh, we want to do a rollout with a piece of technology here, let's buy the smart meter. And same with blockchain. You shouldn't sell the technology, you should sell a solution, right? So this means, what can you do with that? In Sweden, for instance, they now do a rollout with the second generation of smart meters, and they cope with gender questions for acceptance, etc., etc. So this makes, for me at least, a lot of sense. So what is public here? You need a master plan. You have to clarify, where do you want to see private roles or the private sector, what kind of role they can take here. And it's not easy, I think, but you can learn from a lot of experiences. And this would be my point here. So leapfrogging, it's not necessary to repeat all the failures others did. And end-to-end digitalization often starts with a kind of digital meter, etc. This is one part. And yeah, a greenfield approach might be very good. We have already built a lot of systems. So I mean Germany or many countries in Europe, and it's much harder to further develop in old-fashioned systems even further. So yeah, maybe it makes sense at some parts to really do a greenfield approach here.
Thank you very much. I think one part of what you just said really stood out for me and rang true, where it's, it's not tech, but it's the solution, right? So I think sometimes when we get caught up in the weeds with really these technologies, maybe we don't forget about, what we're actually trying to achieve, but it's not at the forefront because, as many people say, no one really knows how TCP/IP works or the internet works, but when you get on your phone and you use Uber, a car will come, but you don't exactly know how, and you don't really need to know how. You just need to know how this technology will actually impact your life, how it will make you better. And we need to really keep an eye on the fact that we need to make sure that these technologies are improving the lives of those in our member states without focusing too much on the technology. So I think what you said really rings true. So thank you for that. Before we open the floor for Q&A, because I want to have at least 20 minutes for that, I wanted to give a chance for those on the panel here in person for any reflections before we open Q&A. So perhaps Samer, if we want to start with you, and then maybe Andres and Jessica.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I think this end-to-end solution is very complicated. Just from regulations and policy, just to merge 4 laws together and start issuing new regulations and laws for the blockchain, it's very complicated. It's going to take a lot of years, and by the time you get something going, something new will come up. So I think we have 2 options. We have the poor people and the let's say crowdfunding and developing small microgrids with the crowdfunding money. This is a very good option for the blockchain. And the DSO, the distribution system operators, will keep managing this. So this will be like I don't want let's say non-core business for the DSO. So the crowdfunding is bringing the money, the DSO is managing the infrastructure, the blockchain is securing end-to-end this microgrid, and maybe generating REX and more money. So this I think this might be feasible. Also, if you want to do a pilot project inside the city, it's a pilot project. No need to change all the regulations and laws and bylaws and so on and so forth. Just do the pilot project for, let's say, 10,000 people, 5,000 people, and learn and generate the learning lessons. This is also feasible and doable. So the DSO will I think will be interested in this, because they need to move with the with whatever happening in the world. Thank you very much. Over to you, Shah.
Thank you. Please, Andres, go ahead.
So yeah, I think that we are in a race against climate change, and identifying and prioritizing is definitely something that needs to be put on the table. And just using the technical paper or using the comments that we've made here, you can really look at what's the lowest hanging fruit in terms of what's being used, what's ready, what's in production in market. And for example, I saw that there were more references to traceability projects, these that track energy generation and consumption, for example. And I do agree, crowdfunding is a great way to attract investments. But I think that these traceability solutions could be really interesting, in particular for this region. And I'm not an expert. I'm mostly based on Europe, but I do read reports such as the ones that IRENA publishes, and I have been noticing, for example, the Arab region is often recognized as a great potential to become a net exporter of green hydrogen, and you need to track and verify that it is in fact green and it is not gray, because otherwise you won't sell it. I think that also the global installed capacity for carbon capture and storage is 10%, which is a huge percent if we're talking globally. And you also need the assurance and the way to verify. And this is where I think blockchain comes in. And just again, looking at the use cases or the solutions, I think that these are the ones that are in high demand right now, and the ones that are already being used across different countries. And then you can also look at open source projects. So an example, what we do is open source, and that leads to efficiency and leads to reducing costs. So you can have reuse, repurpose, or rebuild upon the experience that other countries or other organizations have already managed to do. That's what I'd close with.
Thank you very much. And I think, yeah, what you mentioned on guarantees of origin, I think maybe it was Jens who mentioned that before. I think, yeah, exactly true with the green hydrogen exports. And I think our trade facilitation team at Esqua has just put together a guide on how countries can use blockchain technology for these purposes, just like you mentioned in terms of trade. So I take your point well, and I'd like to pass now to Ms. Jessica Obaid for any final remarks.
Who's still taking notes, by the way. I think one of the key problematics in the previous or even the existing energy systems so far are that they fail to put people at the heart of the energy systems. But this is what the energy transition and the blockchain would actually enable us to do. And this is why I think one key critical point moving forward is to ensure not only we're engaging policymakers in drafting these policies and implementing pilot projects and so, but that's also an inclusive approach in a way that we engage the local community in a way they're going to be owners of these systems, but also engage the private sector, and that will facilitate implementation and to have these policies eventually once we demonstrate the advantages of the benefits, despite all the many challenges that we're going to go through.
Thank you very much. I'm going to give time for all of our panelists to give remarks as well online, but I first want to check with our colleague Gilles from Esqua if there are questions from Zoom. Okay, any questions in the room, please go ahead and we can address them. Yes, please, Laura, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the very interesting talks and presentations. One thing that obviously is very much highlighted is that it seems that there is an immense potential in applying these type of digital innovations when we want to, bridge the gap to SDGs or SDG 7. But do any of the panelists see that is there a danger that there will be countries, regions, or people that will be left behind from this progress? That how can we sort of ensure equal access to these type of innovative technologies that really bridge the gap and really do make a difference in enabling energy transition and ensuring basic human rights? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any panelists online that would like to volunteer, or shall I just start calling names?
I could start if you wish, Sean.
Please go ahead.
I think that's an excellent question, and I think that is what also other panelists also mentioned. When we discuss about these innovative digital technologies, they have to be fit for purpose. I think that we don't want to digitalize for the sake of digitalizing. So, for example, in the case of a blockchain, it makes sense when you have a certain amount of a huge amount of transactions involving different actors that then becomes extremely complex, let's say, to keep track of what is the transaction, the security around it, etc. But if we think about, for example, a microgrid in a rural area, etc., the application for a technology like blockchain might not be required. So I think it's important to keep in mind that innovation has to be fit for purpose. It doesn't mean that we cannot innovate in these cases. Actually, Africa, and this is something that sometimes is overlooked, Africa has excelled in innovating in certain applications that are relevant for them. Pay-as-you-go models started in Africa. The major growth of solar home systems is there. So I think that it's very important to keep in mind that the different technologies that are emerging must, again, be fit for purpose and see where we can scale them up, where they are more needed to fix or to address which challenges. And the second point is that digital technologies will always, or will never, let's say, replace completely, of course, the requirement of human intervention and the role of regulators, governments, etc. They are tools, they are instruments. But for example, a transaction through blockchain or through a contract, automated smart contract, will help with the transaction, but will not fix, for example, or address any conflict between the parties due to a breach of any clause within the contract. That will require anyway a regulated framework and intervention from parties to resolve disputes. So I think that that's what I wanted to mention, that we have to keep in mind what is the role of different technologies, the role of blockchain, but in general, all these technologies.
Thank you very much, Francisco. Do any other panelists on Zoom like to react to this question?
Sean, Hussein had a raised hand.
Okay, please go ahead.
But thank you very much for this vital question. If I reply to you, because you said nobody should be left behind, my immediate answer to you is like SDG 7. And I give an example about the energy poverty, but I would like here to give an example about the access to indicator, an indicator to the internet usage or access to internet, in addition to the energy poverty that we have. We recently passed the 8 billion mark in terms of population. And the latest data about the access to internet usage is it's about 5.18, if I'm not mistaken. So roughly 37.5%, let's round it to 40% of the world, they don't have access to internet. I think that's the immediate answer to your question. So yes, the answer is yes, about 40% of the people left behind. And that's serious, like energy poverty, like poverty, like any other indicator. And therefore, as I mentioned in my previous intervention, we are in transition. Therefore, we need to look at all the elements in the transition. I would like to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we move to the panel in person, anyone else on Zoom, any of the panelists would like to react? Okay, any of the in-person panelists? Okay, yep, please go ahead, Samir.
Now, if you want to do this blockchain, you need PV, you need storage, you need internet, you need infrastructure, and you need DSO, distribution system operator. And as my colleague said, we have 8 billion now in the world, but we have 1 billion earning less than $2 per day. And we have 650 million without electricity. And the people with the internet, I think we have at least 3 billion people without internet. So who is going to build this for them? Why? If you're talking about Africa, we have major concerns for Africa, but Africa has a lot of good sun. So if there has to be big people big thoughts in order to, let's say, do CSR projects for all of these big projects that are going to export energy to Europe. Maybe they can do some kind of source crowdfunding or something like that. But we need a lot of time in order to do this. And the other, let's say, the Asian countries, they also have pockets of poverty, hundreds of millions there. So you cannot transport energy to Europe from there, but there has to be a win-win situation. So in order for the rich people to help the poor people must have something to give the rich people. Tough. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from the room? Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you for this interesting workshop. I have, in fact, two questions. The first one is how to simplify blockchain's concept to policymakers, stakeholders, and energy consumers, and how to get energy consumers involved in the dissemination or implementation of such a new technology. And the second question is, can you give us an idea about the volume of investment needed to disseminate and implement this new technology in the energy sector in the Arab region? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll open this to all panelists, but I first maybe wanted to give a crack to Jens Strulker, if you had any comments on specifically how to simplify these concepts, not just for energy consumers who may not know about this new tech, but also policymakers and decision makers and things like this. I think if I got your first question correctly. So maybe Jens, if you have any opinion on this, if not, that's fine. I'll open the floor to any panelists.
No, sure. I would love to give an answer here. So my quick answer is don't talk about blockchain, because if you talk about blockchain, people say, oh, there's energy consumption, we have GDPR problem, what about scalability, etc. Then crypto and all the problems with that, regulation. If you can really in detail describe a solution or the solution that you can solve, this is good. For example, end-to-end digitalization. If I can show you, we can trade energy as a neighbor. We know this is a very old example, but it's coming true now. And with the smart meter, and then you talk about, okay, what do we need for that? A smart meter, maybe a digital identity, then we need a system to store the transaction data behind that, market communication if you go further into the market line, and then really to exchange data with the distribution grid operator and so on. So you have to go by examples and not by the technology. This is not a good idea in general. Nobody, as we had just heard, nobody talks about internet protocol anymore, right?
Exactly right. Yeah, thank you very much. Are there any other panelists that would like to address this first question from in the room? Okay. Yeah, I think that was quite a succinct, comprehensive answer. And in terms of the investment needed, I think was your second question of how to actually integrate these new technologies, I guess at the regional level, you're asking. I'm not sure if anyone's going to be able to pull that number out, but if anyone has any, comments or ideas or thoughts on the investment needed or the benefits maybe outweighing the investment needs or things like this from on Zoom or in the room, please let me know if you'd like to speak.
I can say something.
Please go ahead.
Well, that's we have two say dilemma here, because if the question is targeting regarding energy transition, so we are looking at all sorts of the energy within the energy mix, because that's target energy for all. And in order to have a affordable, accessible, and clean energy for all, that's a different issue. And back to say, up to this year, they estimated about 900 billion investment is needed for different various fields, particularly for the clean. But now the estimate has been changed. Why? Because we are lagging behind. That was the issue, and clearly mentioned still the debate. And this is because of the lack of proper estimation. There could be different structure we have within the country, different continent, and different rules and regulation that we have. At the same time, nature of economy of the countries. We're looking at the countries in Africa that my colleague kindly mentioned, that $2 we are talking about. And also at the same time, they do not have access to energy, and the definition is different to have access to the energy. And therefore, when we are looking at if we take out the energy mix only for the clean energy, therefore, again, we need to diversify this. Are you talking about say digitalization, or are you talking about bringing the clean energy? That's a different element again. So the answer depends on the situation that we are going. Perhaps my colleague in Arena, they have a new forecast. Rather, I'm sure it goes more than 900 billion if you target one part. Please.
Yes, Francisco, would you like to talk about the investment needs for the sustainable energy transition, or was that pretty well covered by Hossein?
I think it was well covered. I can certainly update the numbers, but I think that Jens was first, so I can go after Jens if that's okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, I can't see the hands raised, so please let's
go
go
ahead.
Okay,
Because I wanted to switch to the operational level, but you are still on the higher level, and this is perfect. So please go ahead.
Okay, Francisco, please go ahead.
No, I think Hossein was right, and thank you so much for that. Well, our, let's say, updated numbers are that for the energy transition, we will need around $4.1 trillion globally, and out of that, around a quarter would be required for electric infrastructure and electrification. So that's around $1.1 trillion. And that includes not only physical, but also digital infrastructure. So that's the most recent number. But coming back to the investments, the issue with investment is that, of course, is very context driven. So it's very difficult to say how much it would cost in a specific case. But we have been looking into what Sean was mentioning, the cost benefit of these digital solutions. And we have some examples, just to give one. The city of Hamburg, for example, Stromnetz Hamburg, they were looking into, okay, what would be the impact of having 60,000 electric vehicles connected to the low voltage grid by 2025. And one option was, okay, we will need to reinforce the electricity grid, change transformers, etc. Yeah. The other option would be to use digital technology, so the DSO can automatically and remotely control the loads with a pre-agreement, a smart contract with the users of heat pumps, electric vehicles, etc. Yeah, and the difference in investment was of one order of magnitude. So while changing the cables, transformers, etc., would cost around, in those neighborhoods in Hamburg, would cost around 20 million euros. The digital solution with infrastructure, digital infrastructure, etc., would cost around 2 million euros. Yeah, so it's one order of magnitude. That's what we were saying. I was saying before, that it's not a question of whether we should or not use these technologies. We have to identify where they add value, and it's the only way. Smart is the only way to go. Otherwise, the energy transition will not be affordable. So clearly, the benefits, if done smartly, outweigh the cost significantly.
Thank you very much, Francisco. Jens, please go ahead if you have about a minute or so. Thank you.
Yeah, so I think if we look to the investments on the from bottom up to households and companies, I think especially the enterprises are very interesting nowadays, because we see a shift when it comes to energy. Also, we talked about guarantees of origin and green electricity. So we see very interesting development here, because there is a shift, kind of, or seems to be a shift there from carbon counting in former times now to carbon accounting, to maybe more and more to really a carbon management in companies. And this means green electricity at that level, you need primary data. You really need the data that you can prove, So you have the investor side there from a company perspective. We talk about ESG, the goals there, and investors who want to see progress on that level. Otherwise, they do not invest anymore. So this is a common shift right now in the financial sector. Then we have scope 3 emissions, also very directly connected to CO2 and energy at that level. And then, of course, in Europe, at least with CBAM, very demanding at that level in information you have to provide. And also the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, it's the same effect. For all of that, you need to prove your data, and energy can play a good role here. And now these companies want to have this data, so they show interest to invest in metering, sub-metering systems, etc. And this totally changed the incentives for them. In former times, we saw that we talk about energy efficiency, progress there, and they say, oh, investments here, I don't know if this is good for me, etc., etc. And now they say it's on the top level. They say for ESG, we have to prove our progress here, so we will invest at that level. And this means on an operational level, I would say there's much more willingness to invest in this technology. And as society, we should bring these interests here together. So public investment, private investments, and also at the end, households. But I think they are not the forerunners here.
Thank you very much. I think your point on CBAM was quite well taken, the carbon border adjustment mechanism, because as Andres mentioned before, traceability is maybe one of the most useful use cases that we could really see in this region. I see the time is 4 o'clock. Gilles, is there one more question?
We have a question from one of the attendees, Mr. Mohammed Lisser. He's asking about the security of data in blockchain.
Okay, yeah, I think some of the participants did mention data security and things like that, just based on the type of blockchain that is used, whether it's public or private. But I don't know if maybe Andres, you want to just talk a little bit about that quickly before we close?
Yes, sure. I don't want to be dive into details, but in essence, I think Jens also highlighted that in fact, in some use case, you want to keep data out of the blockchain, and this relates to the specific design. However, there is also blockchain relates to encryption, and there are also techniques that can lead to having data published on chain with a hash, which is kind of a way to pseudonymize data, and that the security, the privacy, the sensitivity of this information isn't compromised. But yeah, the blockchain and encryption as well can play a role in help and contribute to preserve security.
Thank you very much. I'm cognizant of the fact that my colleague Omar started us on time, and I should then finish on time to do him justice. I just wanted to thank everyone who joined us in person and online on Zoom. I wanted to thank all the panelists who joined us: Francisco, Miroslav, Andres, Jessica, Jens, Samer, Hossein, and also my colleagues Omar and Gilles, who really managed this session, and also our chief, Ms. Radia Sadawi. Thank you all for joining, and I just wanted to point out one last time that all of this will feed into ESCWA's upcoming report on the topic, the technical paper on the role of blockchain in the sustainable energy transition in the Arab region, which will be launched this summer. So all of the insights from today will be collected and condensed by the team, and they will be included in the report. And I just wanted to thank everyone once again for your involvement. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much.